Jeremy had been under a lot of stress for a couple of weeks, so he decided to take the edge off by taking a stroll in the nearby woods on his 20th birthday. He packed his backpack and started early in the morning on the second day of December. As he was walking through the woods, he held his jade green pentagram pendant fixed on an anchor gold chain in his hand and took a look at it with a bitter smile. He thought of his parents who jointly had given him the pendant as his 13th birthday gift. He envisioned the memory of looking in the mirror that night to see how the green star looked on him when strangely and eerily the glass had shattered into pieces all by itself. Then came the horrific recollection of both his parents getting killed in a tragic accident exactly the next day on the 3rd of December. Although they left Jeremy quite a large sum of inheritance, he went through a difficult time for 7 years. Life had not been easy, and he could hardly remember an uninterrupted period of stability and happiness. Bad luck had become his good buddy. 3 hours later, he found out that he was kind of lost in an unknown surrounding, for he suddenly felt a sense of jamais vu and thought he couldn't find his way back. He was surprised to find out that his wristwatch's sweep second hand had stopped running. To check the time, he pulled his phone out of his back pocket just to find out that due to an unknown reason, phone was off and wasn't turning on as well, although he had just charged it the night before. He stopped walking and pondered for a while. He looked up at the sky. It shouldn't have been even past noon, but he noticed something weird. The sky had turned purplish as it does at twilight. He also felt somewhat chilly and sleepy too, as he had risen too early that morning. So he resolved that it was a good idea to start a bonfire and rest before he headed back to try to find the way home. He dropped his backpack, made a fire, sat down next to it, and warmed his hands. Next, he lay on the ground and gradually fell asleep, immersing in the warmth of the fire. When Jeremy woke up by a bizarre ululation, he had a frightened expression on his face. He stood up and realized that the fire had almost gone out, and he could see the glowing amber amidst the dying flames. The scene mesmerized him so much, as if he was looking at the fire for the first time in his life. At an instant, he was filled with an uncanny feeling of being spoken to by the whole nature surrounding him, though his ears couldn't hear a sound. But it was beyond normal human sensations. And not only the nature, but it seemed like the whole universe was calling upon him to take heed of that grand singular moment of transformation into something new. For a fraction of a second, he felt like he was being transported through space-time fabric to somewhere unfamiliar, to a new level, a fresh start, where he intuitively knew that a chapter had finally been closed and a new one had begun for him. Jeremy broke out of his peculiar meditation with the sound of a thunder from the sky above him. Soon it started to drizzle. It was time for him to pick up his bag and walk again and try to find his passage out of the woods. The rain was getting heavier. Jeremy was walking briskly forward but had no clue about his direction. But sometime later, on his way, he met a group of reporters who were heading to a specific spot, and Jeremy thought it's best to join them as they seemed to know their way around the forest. The rain had stopped and sun was shining again. On their way, a young girl among the team named Julia explained to Jeremy that the police had reported an incident deep in the woods, and that was where they were heading. In a while, the group reached the spot. Police yellow barricade tape could be seen around the trees enclosing a circle. There was quite a commotion at the scene, with police officers and few black-suited officials pacing about. Once they got close, Jeremy could see a rather large, strange-looking black object in the center of the barricade. He nudged Julia, who was talking to one of the officials and jotting down notes, and whispered to her, "What's that on the ground?" Julia replied, "Apparently, it's an unidentified burnt body." Upon hearing that piece of unexpected information, Jeremy jolted suddenly and went totally silent for a while. Then he began looking at the black corpse more intensely out of curiosity. It was a totally charred human being, all right. Jeremy was appalled by the sight and the stench that had filled the air. The body had turned into a big, disfigured charcoal. The remains were flexed and twisted, and the face was beyond recognition. And then something caught his attention. A greenish glowing object near the body's neck. He could not make out what it was from afar. So as Julia and other reporters crossed the yellow strips to get closer to the scorched structure, as their cameras were clicking incessantly, he followed them and went close to observe. What appeared before his eyes made his legs shake, and he came down heavy on his knees next to the burnt body. The object around the person's charred neck was a jade green pentagram pendant on an anchor gold chain. It was surprisingly and shockingly similar to his own piece, so his hand went towards his own neck instinctively to grab the pendant, but there was none. His gazing eyes remained fixed on the green pentagram, and his open, empty hand rested on his chest for a long while. Jeremy felt the warmth of a kind stare weighing on him, so he turned his eyes upon Julia's beautiful face. She was smiling at him, and he smiled in return.